Welcome back to week 2 of Module 1, where we're still looking at promoting children's success. We're going to finish up on building relationships, and we're going to begin looking at creating supportive environments. So I did hear from Heather that the voiceover PowerPoints work really well and kind of help you understand the context of the slides. So I'm ready to move forward then. And again, if you have any challenges, you can address those to Heather, and she will contact me if I need to make any adjustments to the PowerPoints. So let's make sure you're ready to move forward. The first two things that you need to do are make sure that you did last week's PowerPoint. If you haven't watched that, then you need to start there because you will be building on information from that previous PowerPoint. Also, if you didn't read the Building Positive Relationships with Young Children, you want to do that before you begin this PowerPoint. You're going to be using some of the information in there to address and answer your questions as something you reflect upon, whether you currently do with children or not. Finally, you want to print, or actually there's two things here. You want to print this week's worksheet number 2 so that you can take your notes on it and later type in your responses and submit that to Heather. And then finally, we're going to revisit the inventory of practices that we used last week. So if it's not on your module for this week, you will go back to module 1 and open it. You don't need to print it. You'll just need to look at a page within that inventory of practice. So we've completed the overview. We began looking at how to build relationships with children. We're going to continue and build on that. We're going to look at how to build relationships with families. We're going to look at the importance of having relationships with your team players or your co-teachers. And then we're going to start looking at creating engaging environments. So environments that promote social and emotional development and are set up to prevent challenging behaviors. So this video, it's about 16 minutes, is kind of revisiting those things that we looked at in terms of challenging behaviors, things that might push our buttons, some strategies that we have not talked about yet that could be used. So though there is nothing on your worksheet for this, I actually would encourage you to write down notes or things that kind of are your aha or stick out to you, especially in terms of how it relates to building relationships and strategies that you can use. Because you may use some of these in your worksheet responses as we move through some of the other questions. Last week, we looked at those things that showed that we had connections with children, or what it might look like if a teacher was disconnected. And it's important to realize that we have to have connections with children to change behaviors. So that's that relationship piece. If you don't have a relationship, you cannot change challenging behaviors or any behaviors without first having a relationship with the child. So we're going to build on that, and we're going to be looking at how do we build relationships with children. And so this piggy bank is a little metaphor that actually illustrates making deposits into a child's emotional bank account as a way of building positive relationships. So the more money that you get, coins that you put in slowly each day, the fuller the bank account becomes. Another metaphor that you might use for this would be you might use a basket or a garden growing. The seeds start, you plant the water, and they become bigger and bigger and bigger. Or a basket filling up with things. So you start with one thing in your basket and you continue to fill it up. So we make deposits when we do things to build relationships, while we make withdrawals when we engage in behaviors that are detrimental to building relationships. So when we talk to a child in a negative way, we actually take money out of the child's emotional bank account. So this is true for all of us. So what we know is that for every negative, it takes 5 positives to bring the balance back. So we want to give children attention when they're engaged in appropriate behavior versus putting our energy in always disciplining or interacting with the child when we're correcting behavior. So you're going to look at question 1 on your worksheet, which is actually going to have you list 3 things that you think you have done in your practicum experience that would contribute to building a child's emotional bank account. So now you're going to watch another video on building positive relationships, and hopefully these videos are opening, but there is the link above. I would encourage you to write down things that you learned from this video. It's not required on your worksheet, but you may be able to use some of the different things from this video to answer some of your own questions on the worksheet in terms of things that you currently do with children that you believe build positive relationships. It's about a 9-minute video. I think it's really well done, and it really, again, builds on some of the strategies we've already talked about or will be talking about. So here are some examples of things that build the emotional bank account for children. And these also were very similar to those that were found on your Building Positive Relationships under your Inventory of Practice Skills and Indicators #1. So we want to acknowledge children's communication, verbal and nonverbal. We don't always have to talk. I oftentimes see teachers do a bit too much talking. They over-talk children, but this would be that children just need a thumbs up, a smile to show that you hear them, perhaps a question to have them share something beyond what they've shared, or feeding back what they just said, such as, I can see that you're really, really happy that Jennifer's playing with you right now on the playground. Again, we talked about greeting children by their name. No matter what you're doing, you should acknowledge each child as they arrive in your classroom. We want to engage in one-on-one conversations at eye level. I actually try to make note of myself. Did I actually go through and see each child in the morning while we were inside? We want to use a pleasant, calm voice and simple language. So this is hard because we don't hear our own tones, and when we hear ourselves on a recording, such as when I review what I'm recording to you, we often think that that's not the sound of our voice. But 30% of what we communicate to children is through the tone of our voice. We want to be warm, responsive, and have physical contact. And I think I'm so concerned with programs that are setting so many rules around physical contact, not only with teachers with their children, but they're actually not allowing children to touch each other in positive, caring ways, such as holding hands or hugging each other. We want to follow the child's leads and interests during play. So I see sometimes teachers who take over the play versus just sitting down. So children are building a zoo, and all of a sudden they start orchestrating what you should do. Well, let's build a building over here. Why don't we put all the elephants together and put the giraffes in a separate cage, rather than just being a partner who really is taking the lead of the child. We want to listen to children and encourage them to listen to others, and we want to acknowledge children's accomplishments and effort. So the child may be helping pick up the block corner, and why do we have to wait till the task is finished? While the child is doing this, we want to make comments. Wow, you're working really hard to put the blocks away. I noticed that you're really paying attention to putting the blocks in the right area they belong. That really helps keep our classroom organized. So things like that. So in this slide, you'll notice two columns, those things that we do that are part of building relationships that create positive outcomes or deposits into the child's bank account, and those things that are withdrawals. So that 5-to-1 ratio means that for every 1 withdrawal, we have to have 5 positives. So I really want to draw your attention to the first 3 words in the withdrawal side. I think that we are not even conscious of how often we use these words within a given day. And this is a skill that we have to learn to really pay attention to, and to learn how to re-script things and say that in a way that's not a withdrawal. So if I say to the child, no loud voices inside, that is a negative. That's a withdrawal. The child hears the no and oftentimes doesn't know what we want, versus saying, I can see you're really excited, but your voice is getting really loud. So let's talk about how we can make it a little bit more quiet so other people are not hearing this. Don't climb on the cabinets, versus saying, I see you really would like to climb. However, we can't climb on cabinets, but when you go outside, is something you can climb on? Stop that. Stop taking the toy away from your friends, versus, I know you really want the toy right now, but I can't let you pull it away from him. Let's figure out what we can do to help you get a toy that you'll be happy with. So those are things that we have to just learn to be conscious of, similar to the fact that we use the word okay all the time. Can you clean up now? Okay. When really what we mean is that we need you to clean up. So when we use the word okay at the end of a sentence, we're giving a child a choice, and the child has the choice to say no. Do you want to clean up now? No. And we don't understand why they're not doing it. So we want to make sure that we have real specific verbiage of the things that we want. I see that you want to continue playing, but right now it's cleanup time and we're going to need to put this away. So you're going to have an opportunity now to practice this, and this is going to be your question 2 on your worksheet. And these are some difficult scenarios, but this is that idea of looking at children with challenging behaviors or things that we might find challenging. We have to build relationships with all children, and we have to support each child's emotional bank account and fill it up with positive comments or positive interactions. So you're going to choose one of these 4 scenarios and think about what you might do to support this child in terms of building a positive relationship that might look different from other children. So this slide is kind of recapping some of the benefits for building relationships. Some of these were mentioned in some of the videos you watched, and some just are things that probably make common sense to you. So the first is that in our field, our overarching goal is developed to each child's emotional, cognitive, and social self. We also hope that in the context of our preschool, we help children develop secure attachments to adults as well as develop relationships with peers. Because really relationships are the cornerstone of everything we do in life. People don't realize that every interaction we have with another human being is a brief moment of a relationship, no matter how brief or whether it's our spouse, which is hopefully long term. So even if I go into the grocery store, that moment that I'm engaging with the cashier, the clerk, is a relationship, right? So those of us that are able to sustain and engage in positive relationships are going to have much more positive outcomes in our life. The other thing we want to do is to help reduce the frequency of behavior problems. So again, in the context of changing relationships, or what I want to say, changing behaviors, we cannot do those without relationships. We want to help children develop positive self-esteem. So children have a tendency to believe they are who we tell them they are. So if we see them in a positive light, they will see themselves in a positive light. And it results in higher rates of child engagement. So that child who feels good and comfortable and capable and confident is going to engage more within our preschool settings. And this slide and the next are just some things that we can do, simple building relationships, the power of a photograph. I don't know if you use photographs in your classroom or saw them at your lab site, but children love looking at themselves, especially themselves, very egocentric, but they also enjoy looking at their classmates. So this is making sure that this teacher has a picture of all the children in her classroom, and this is a quiet area where this picture just says you matter. You're a part of this group and you matter. This is just a lovely way if your classroom celebrates birthdays. I'll often see those birthday cakes hanging in classroom walls that are bought at a teacher supply store, and it'll say the child's name under the month. Where this is much more effective and really shows each child that they matter. So if you look here, here are the 3 children within that classroom whose birthdays we are going to celebrate in March. In other words, so part of this relationship is you matter to us, your birthday matters to us, and we are going to celebrate or acknowledge that. Here's a list of ideas for making deposits. We've already talked about some of these, the greet the child each day, post children's artwork around the classroom or pictures of the child. One of the things I even like to do is ask a child if they would like their artwork or their picture posted before I even do it. Call a child's parent in front of them to say they had a great day or send home a positive note. So walking over to the parent and say, what a wonderful day, maybe illustrating some of the things the child did that day that are all positive. Call a child at home after a difficult day and say, I'm sorry you had a tough day. I know that tomorrow is going to be better. Again, doing those things that are individualized for each child. Some children like hugs, some kids like high fives, some kids like thumbs up, some children like to be addressed in verbal ways and some in nonverbal ways. So each child's individual in terms of how I'm going to give them some of those positive relationship building strategies. And a few more examples. When a child misses school, tell them how much he was missed. I actually had a teacher who I had no idea had a child that she was not connecting with until she finally shared it with me. And she was really in a power struggle with this child. She was not, this child was not talking to her or asking for support or help. So at lunchtime, I found out she wasn't helping him open or offering to open things that he could not open. And one of the things that we came up with the strategy was that when he first came in the morning in this greeting thing and that she missed him, is that she was going to say, "Hi, Jack. It's Monday. I'm so glad you were here. I was thinking about you over the weekend and I was hoping you would come to school today." From that moment on, that child's behavior changed and he no longer saw it as a challenging behavior, like, why won't he ask for help? But the child realized he was embraced and began to ask for help. Find time to read to children or a few children, acknowledge their efforts. So we don't have to do everything well, but a child who tries hard to do something that maybe can't quite get it yet. So that child that was riding the bicycle that I used as an example, each time saying something like, "I notice how hard you are working to learn how to ride the two-wheeler." Give compliments to the child. So compliment the things they do. Again, the child that rode the bike. "Wow, that was really awesome. You must feel really good about yourself. You rode the bike all the way around the loop without help." Play with children, follow their lead, so don't take over their play. Find out what a child's favorite book is and read it to the whole class. Let children make an all about me book. So I don't know if you did this in CD15, but each child has their individual book where pictures are added to it. It might have, it should have pictures of their families. It would indicate their birth date. It might have a picture of their house. You might have a thing where you write, what are your favorite things to do at school? And the child tells you, and you list them in his or her book. And then those books should be made available in the classroom where children can go and look at them when they want to, as well as shared at circle time. So if a picture was added, share it with all the children. Today, Jessica added a picture of playing in the playhouse with Taylor, and she told me to write, "Taylor is my best friend." And this is just a lovely quote. "Every child needs one person who is crazy about him or her." Brofenbremer just used the word him. His theories are a little bit outdated, so we would say him or her today. And so that's true. And each child needs to think that you're that person in the classroom. They can feel. Children are very intuitive, and they know when a teacher likes them or does not. So questions 3, 4, and 5 are really going to look at strategies that you might use to build relationships with families. So one is about why you think it's important. The other one is what are ideas and how can you make deposits. So the questions are a little bit different on the slide, but every child comes with a family. Some actually come with more than one parent. And so they have two families that you need to embrace. And if we don't have a relationship with the families, we really don't have a relationship with the child because we need to understand that family and that child in context of that family. So now you will answer 3, 4, and 5. Now you're going to also then look at your co-teaching team. So those people that you work in the classroom with, perhaps the entire staff of your center. And you're going to reflect on these two questions on why it's important to have a relationship with those people that you work with. And how does that impact your instruction? So those things that you do within your classroom, designing your classroom, the materials you offered it. Why do you need to have a team to understand and to create a engaging classroom to support children? And then why is it important to have a team if you are dealing with a child or children with challenging behaviors? What importance does understanding and having an ability to communicate with your team workers play in this role of supporting a child with challenging behavior? For question 7, you're going to come up with 3 ideas or strategies that you might use to build a relationship with your teaching team. So I'm going to give you one that you can't use. So for example, we may say that we host a monthly potluck in the staff lounge as a strategy we use to be part of a team. So we finished the module or the section of the module that related to nurturing and responsive relationships. We're now going to move into how do we create supportive environments and have several weeks where we look at that. So I want to remind you that the emphasis in CSEFL, again, is to promote social and emotional skills and to prevent problem behaviors. So these may not be new concepts to you, but we want to think of them in terms of how they relate to preventing challenging behaviors. So you may have talked about classroom environments in CD6, you might have talked about it in CD3, but we're going to look at it a little bit more in depth in terms of the setup and the things we do and how they either promote or prevent challenging behavior. So we're going to be looking at these through the social and emotional and challenging behavior lens. And we're going to start by looking at the physical layout of the environment and the designing of the learning centers, how we have traffic patterns, where we put each center in terms of how it can reduce or actually promote challenging behavior. So we're going to be looking at this overarching concept of creating high quality supportive environments, which really is what quality should be like. What does it look like in a high quality program? And these overarching principles are that we need to look at that our centers and our environments keep children engaged, all children. So different children have different needs, different children have different interests, different children have different abilities. We're going to be looking at what's called a universal design for learning. So that's that concept that environments provide support for all children to learn from. And then we're going to look at what are those things that we might have to make adjustments or accommodations for to make sure that we can provide that support for every child in our program. So if we have a child who actually uses or is English is their second language, do we have ways to communicate with that child that provide visual cues when the child doesn't understand our verbal cues? So when we have those things in place, our goal, again, is to promote the engagement of every child. So you have to think of every child's needs within your classroom. And this is a struggle because you'll have a large group of children who setting up an environment a specific way, say a way that you've always done, that you've always liked, works for. But there's one child it doesn't. And you'll have this attitude that many teachers will say, well, why do I need to change it for this one child when everybody else adjusts just fine to this? So let's say we have a child who is hypersensitive to noise. And we've always had a basket of instruments in our center, or we've put out things that are at the table that might require a hammer and banging and noise. And that's always worked. So, but we have a child who derails when it gets too loud in the environment. You do need to change the environment. Those kids that can tolerate sound are not going to be limited or disadvantaged, but the fact that you are stopping a child in the program that could derail with the loud noises is going to make the classroom a calmer place and all children more successful. So these are the categories or the different things we'll be looking at when we talk about arranging the classroom. Today we're going to focus on the physical design, then we'll be looking at the environmental clues, how schedules and routines, as well as transitions, impact challenging behavior. How do we promote engagement during large group and small group activities? What are the role of rules and how simple should they be and how should they be written? And then what are we going to do to make sure that we're ongoing monitoring positive attention to ensure that we are giving children the positive support and attention that they need in our classrooms? So the last three questions on your worksheet are really going to involve thinking back into the environment where you did your lab hours before we had to shelter in place. This might be difficult because it recalls trying to remember how the room was set up, how many centers were there, how many large group spaces were there. And so it can be difficult. And Heather and I recognize that. So I have provided also a 10-minute video on a classroom where teachers showing you her day in the preschool. It's not ideal because you can't stand in one place and see it, but it gives you an opportunity to see different learning centers that are set up. If you are really struggling with recalling your lab site, classroom environment, I completely understand. And you can do a couple things. You could reach out to the mentor teacher that you're working with and have him or her walk you through the setup. Perhaps they might even, I think they can't even go into their work sites, but maybe they have pictures that illustrate that. So you could do it that way, or again, you could use the video. You're going to be using one page that's in your inventory of practices handout, and that's page 4, where it looks at number 4, which is designs physical environments. And so that is, you just want to have that open so you can read that. It is about, I don't know, 10 indicators. And those have been made into questions on your worksheet, kind of combined together and created into questions. This is the video that you can watch. There are parts of it that you might need, you could skip over, but I wouldn't. I think what I would do is if I was watching this video, I might have to stop it and pause it a few times to answer some of the questions on my worksheet. I might have to go back to another section. I think I might watch it through its entirety, and then I might have to go back and find those sections that I think would help me answer those questions. Because question number 8 on your worksheet has 7 sub-questions under it. And again, this video isn't going to help you, won't help you answer either, but these would be reach outs to your mentor teacher in terms of how often they rotate materials in their classroom. You could use your curriculum logs for this as well, looking and seeing what kind of activities had been completed while you were there. Think back on those things that you observed that you created lesson plans on, and that may actually help you again with those questions found under number 8. And your final 2 questions are really to think about the environment that you did your lab work in, and think about if you can remember a child that you saw that demonstrated what you perceived to be as challenging behaviors. And think about if there were any things that could have been done in the classroom based on those 7 questions under number 8 that might have been able to be changed that you think would have fostered better behavior from that child. I'm going to give you an example. In the outdoor environment at the lab school, I know it's been brought up before that sometimes the climbers close, the big giant climber in the center of the classroom, the playground, because they don't have enough staff to watch it. And there's a lot of having to go back and forth and reminding children to get off of it and get off it. And depending on a child's temperament, that could be easy. You just tell them we're not using the climber, it's not a problem. But another child's temperament, that might actually throw them into some disequilibrium. They might cry about it, they might run away from you, they might try to stay on the climber. And so one of the things we came up with in practicum was, wouldn't it be nice to put some types of signs around the climber when that happened, or caution tape that showed that they could visually see that I can't go on that now. So it would stop them from going to the climber to begin with, which would mean that they wouldn't be told that no or don't, or they had to get off, right? And the final question is about thinking back on, do you think there's more challenging behavior inside or outside, and why you think that might be at your lab site? In some cases, there's more challenging behavior outside because the playground's too small or there's not enough materials. In other cases, the outside time is when children have a lot of room to run, can use a lot of physical energy, and there's less challenging behaviors. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, stay positive, and I will be meeting with you verbally next week.